50 Years in the Church of Rome, Chapter 39. On the morning of the 25th of August, 1842, we blessed and opened the 7th school of Beauport. From that day, all the children were to receive as good an education as could be given in any country place of Canada. Those schools have been raised on the ruins of the 7 taverns, which had so long spread ruin, shame, desolation, and death over that splendid parish. My heart was filled with an unspeakable joy at the sight of the marvelous things by which the hand of God had been wrought in such a short time. About 2 p.m. of that never-to-be-forgotten day, after I had said my vespers and was alone pacing the alleys of my garden, under the shade of the old maple trees bordering the northern part of that beautiful spot, I was reviewing the struggles and the victories of these last 4 years. It seemed that everything around me, not only the giant trees which were protecting me from the burning sun, but even the humblest grasses and flowers of my garden, had a voice to tell me, "Bless the Lord for his mercies." At my feet, the majestic St. Lawrence was rolling its deep waters beyond the old capital of Canada, Quebec, with its massive citadel, its proud towers, its bristling cannons, its numerous houses and steeples with their tin roofs, reflecting the light of the sun in myriads of rays, formed such a spectacle of fairy beauty as no pen can describe. The fresh breeze from the river mingled with the perfume of the thousands of flowers of my Pertee, bathed me in an atmosphere of fragrance. Never yet had I enjoyed life as at that hour. All the sanguine desires of my heart and the holy aspirations of my soul had been more than realized. Peace, harmony, industry, abundance, happiness, religion, and education had come on the heels of temperance to gladden and cheer the families which God had entrusted to me. The former hard feelings of my ecclesiastical superiors had been changed into sentiments and acts of kindness much above my merits. With the most sincere feelings of gratitude to God, I said with the old prophet, "Bless the Lord, O my soul." By the great mercy of God, that parish of Beauport, which at first had appeared to me as a bottomless abyss in which I was to perish, had been changed for me into an earthly paradise. There was only one desire in my heart. It was that I never should be removed from it. Like Peter on Mount Tabor, I wanted to pitch my tent in Beauport to the end of my life. But the rebuke which had shamed Peter came as quickly as lightning to show me the folly and vanity of my dreams. Suddenly, the carouse of the Bishop of Quebec came in sight and rolled to the door of the parsonages. The subsecretary, the Reverend Mr. Bissell, alighting from it, directed his steps towards the garden, where he had seen me. He handed me the following letter from the Right Reverend Turgeon, Coadjutor of Quebec. "My dear Monsieur Cinque, His Lordship Bishop Signy and I wish to confer with you on a most important matter. We have sent our carriage to bring you to Quebec. Please come without the least delay. Yours truly, Flavius Turgeon." 1 hour later, I was with the 2 bishops. My Lord Signy said, "Monsieur Turgeon would tell you why we have sent for you in such haste." "Monsieur Cinque," said the Bishop Turgeon, "is not Kamarowska your birthplace?" "Yes, my lord." "Do you like that place? And do you interest yourself much in its welfare?" "Of course, my lord. I like Kamarowska, not only because it is my birthplace and the most happy hours of my youth were spent in it, but also because, in my humble opinion, the beauties of its scenery, the purity of its atmosphere, the fine manners and proverbial intelligence of its people make it the very gem of Canada. You know, replied the bishop, that Reverend Monsieur Veteran has been too infirm these last years to superintend the spiritual interest of that important place. It is impossible to continue putting a young vicar at the head of such a parish, where hundreds of the best families of our aristocracy of Quebec and Montreal resort every summer. We have, too, long tried that experiment of young priests in the midst of such a people. It has been a failure. Drunkenness, luxuries, the immoralities of the most degrading kind are eating up the very life of the Kamarowska today. Not less than 30 illegitimate births are known and registered in different places from Kamarowska these last 12 months. It is quite time to stop that state of affairs, and you are the only one, Monsieur Cinque, on whom we can rely for that great and difficult work. These last words passed through my soul as a two-edged sword. My lips quivered. I felt as if I were choking, and my tongue with difficulty muttered, "My Lord, I hope it's not your intention to remove me from my dear parish of Beauport." "No, Monsieur Cinque, we will not make use of our authority to break the sacred and sweet ties which unite you to the parish of Beauport, but we will put before your conscience the reasons we wish you at the head of the great and important parish of Kamarowska." For more than an hour the two bishops made strong appeals to my charity, for the multitudes were sunk in the abyss of drunkenness and every vice, and had no one to save them. "See how God and men are blessing you today," added Archbishop Signy, "for what you have done in Beauport. They will not bless you still more if you save the great and splendid parish of Kamarowska as you have saved Beauport. Will not a double crown be put on your forehead by your bishops, your country, and your God, if you consent to be the instrument of the mercies of God towards the people of your own birthplace and the surrounding country, as you have just been for Beauport and its surrounding parishes? Can you rest and live in peace now in Beauport, when you hear day and night the voices of the multitude who cry, 'Come to our help, we are perishing'? What will you answer to God at the last day, when he will show you the thousands of precious souls lost at Kamarowska, because you refuse to go to the rescue? As Monsieur Turgeon has said, we will not make use of our authority to force you to leave your present position. We hope that the prayers of your bishops will be enough for you. We know what a great sacrifice it will be for you to leave Beauport today. But do not forget that the greater sacrifice, the more precious will the crown be." My bishops had spoken to me with such kindness. Their parental and friendly appeals had surely more power over me than orders. Not without many tears, but with true goodwill, I consented to give up the prospects of peace and comfort which were in store for me in Beauport, to plunge myself again into a future of endless troubles and warfare by going to Kamarowska. There is no need of saying that the people of Beauport did all in their power to induce the bishops to let me remain among them some time longer. But the sacrifice had to be made. I gave my farewell address on the second Sabbath of September in the midst of indescribable cries, sobs, and tears. And on the 17th of that same month I was on my way to Kamarowska. I had left everything behind me at Beauport, even to my books, in order to be freer in that formidable conflict which seemed to be in store for me in my new parish. When I took leave of the Bishop of Quebec, they showed me a letter just received from them from Monsieur Varenne, filled with the most bitter expressions of indignation on account of the choice of such a fanatic and firebrand as Chinquet for a place as well known for its peaceful habits and harmony among all classes. The last words of the letter were as follows: "The clergy and the people of Kamarowska and vicinity consider the appointment of Monsieur Chinquet to this parish to be an insult. We hope and pray that your lordship may change your mind on this subject." And showing me the letter, my lord Signet and Turgeon said, "We fear that you will have more trouble than we expected with the old curate and his persons, but we commend you to the grace of God and the protection of the Virgin Mary, remembering that our Saviour has said, 'Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world.' John 16:33. I arrived at Kamarowska on the 21st of September, 1842, on one of the finest days of the year, but my heart was filled with unspeakable desolation. For all along the way the curates had told me that the people with their old pastor were unanimous in their opposition to my going there. It was even rumored that the doors of the church would be shut against me the next Sunday. To this bad news were added two very strange facts. My brother Achilles, who was living at St. Michael's, was to drive me from that place to St. Roch des Alouettes, where my other brother Louis would take me to Kamarowska. But we had not traveled more than 5 or 6 miles when the wheel of the newly finished and beautifully painted buggy, having struck a stone, the seat was broken into fragments, and we both fell to the ground. By chance, as my brother was blessing the man who had sold him that rig for a new and first-class conveyance, a traveler going the same way passed by. I asked him for a place in his calash, bade adieu to my brother, and consoled him by saying, "As you have lost your fine buggy in my service, I will give you a better one." 2 days later, my second brother was driving me to my destination, and when about 3 or 4 miles from Kamarowska, his fine horse stepped on a long nail which was on the road, fell down, and died in awful convulsions of tetanus. I took leave of him and consoled him also by promising to give him another horse. Another carriage took me safely to the end of my journey. However, having to pass by the church, which was about 200 yards from the parsonage, I dismissed my driver at the door of the sacred edifice, took my satchel in my hand, which was my only baggage, entered the church, and spent more than an hour in fervent prayers, or rather in cries and tears. I felt so heartsick that I needed that hour for rest and prayer. The tears I shed there relieved my burdened spirit. A few steps from me, in the cemetery, lay the remains of my beloved mother, whose angelic face and memory were constantly before me. Facing me was the altar where I had made my first communion. At my left was the pulpit, which was to be the battlefield where I had to fight the enemies of my people and my God, who, I had been repeatedly told, were cursing and grinding their teeth at me. But the vision of that old curate I had soon to confront, and who had written such an impudent letter against me to the bishops, and the public opposition of the surrounding priests to my coming in their midst, were the most discouraging aspects of my new position. I felt as if my soul had been crushed. My very existence seemed an unbearable position. My new responsibilities came so vividly before my mind in that distressing hour that my courage for a moment failed me. I reproached myself for the act of folly in yielding to the request of the bishops. It seemed evident that I had accepted a burden too heavy for me to bear. But I prayed with all the fervor of my soul to God and to the Virgin Mary, and wept to my heart's content. There is a marvelous power in the prayers and tears which come from the heart. I felt like a new man. I seemed to hear the trumpet of God calling me to the battlefield. My only business was to go on and fight, relying on Him alone for victory. I took my traveling bag, went out of the church, and walked slowly towards the parsonage, which had been burnt since. It was a splendid 2-story building, 80 feet in length, with capacious cellars. It had been built shortly after the conquest of Canada as a store for contraband goods, but after a few years of failure became the parsonage of the parish. The Reverend Monsverin, though infirm and sick, had watched me from his window, and felt bewildered at my entering the church and remaining so long. I knocked at the first door, but nobody answered. I opened it, and crossed the first large room to knock at the second door, but here also no answer came except from 2 furious little dogs. I entered the room, fighting the dogs which bit me several times. I knocked at a third and fourth doors with the same results. No one to receive me. I knew that the next was the old curate's sleeping room. At my knocking, an angry voice called out, "Walk in." I entered, made a step towards the old curate, and who was sitting in his large armchair. I was about to salute him when he angrily said, "The people of Viewport have made great efforts to keep you in their midst, but the people of Kamarowska will make a great effort to turn you out of this place." "Monsieur le Curé," I answered calmly, "God knoweth that I never desired to leave Beauport for this place. But I think it is that great and merciful God who has brought me here by the hand, and I hope He will help me overcome all opposition from whatever quarter it may come." He replied angrily, "Is it to insult me that you call me Monsieur le Curé? I am no more the curate of Kamarowska. You are now Mr. Chinque." "I beg your pardon, my dear Mr. Varon. You are still. I hope you will remain all your life the honored and beloved curate of Kamarowska. The respect and gratitude I owe you have caused me to refuse the titles and honors which our bishop wanted to give me. But then if I am the curate, what are you? Replied the old priest with more calmness. I am nothing but a simple soldier of Christ. I am a sower of the good seed of the gospel, I answered. When I fight the common enemy in the plain as Joshua did, you, like Moses, will stand on the top of the mountain, lift your hands to heaven, send your prayers to the mercy seat, and we will gain the day. Then both will bless the God of our salvation for the victory. Well, this is beautiful, grand, sublime, said the old priest, with a voice filled with friendly emotions. But whence is your household furniture, your library? My household furniture, I answered, is in this little bag which I hold in my hand. I do not want any of the books as long as I have the pleasure and honor of being with the good Monsieur Verin, who will allow me, I am sure of it, to ransack his splendid library and study his rare and learned books. But what rooms do you wish to occupy? Replied the old curate. As the parsonage is yours and not mine, I answered, please tell me where you want me to rest and sleep. I will accept with gratitude any room you will offer me, even if it were in your cellar or granary. I do not want to bother you in any way. When I was a young poor orphan in your parish some 20 years ago, were you not a father to me? Please continue to look upon me as your own child, for I have always loved and considered you as a father. I still do the same. Were you not my guide and advisor in my first steps in the ways of God? Please continue to be my guide and advisor to the end of your life. My only ambition is to be your right-hand man, and to learn from your old experience and your sincere piety how to live and work as a good priest of Jesus Christ. I had not finished the last sentence when the old man burst into tears, threw himself into my arm, pressed me to his heart, bathed me with his tears, and said, with a voice half suffocated by his sobs, My dear Mr. Jinquet, forgive me the evil things I have written and said about you. You are welcome in my personage, and I bless God to have sent me such a young friend who will help me carry the burden of my old age. I then handed him the bishop's letter, which confirmed all I had said about my mission of peace towards him. From that day to his death, which occurred 6 months after, I have never had a more sincere friend than Mr. Verin. I thanked God who had enabled me at once not only to disarm the chief of my opponents, but to transform him into my most sincere and devoted friend. My hope was that the people would soon follow their chief and be reconciled to me. But I did not expect this should be so soon, and from such an unseen and unexpected cause. The principal reason the people had to oppose my coming to Kamarowska was that I was the nephew of the honorable, amiable Dion, who had made a colossal fortune at their expense. The Reverend Mr. Verin always was in debt and was forced by circumstances to buy everything, both for himself and the church, from him, and had to pay without murmur the most exorbitant prices for everything. In that way, the church and the curate, though they had very large revenues, had never enough to clear their accounts. When the people heard that the nephew of Monsieur Dion was their curate, they said to each other, Now our poor church is forever ruined, for the nephew will steal more than the curate favor his uncle, and the uncle will be less scrupulous than ever in asking more unreasonable prices for his merchandise. They felt they had more than fallen from Cheridus into Cilia. The very next day after my arrival, the beadle told me that the church needed a few yards of cotton for some repairs, and asked me if he would not go as usual to Mr. Dion's store. I told him to go there first, ask the price of that article, and then go to the other stores, ordering him to buy at the cheapest one. 30 cents was asked at Mr. Dion's and only 15 cents at Mr. St. Pierre's. Of course we bought at the latter store. The day was not over before this apparently insignificant fact was known all over the parish, and was taking the most extraordinary and unforeseen proportions. Farmers would meet with their neighbors and congratulate themselves that at last the yoke imposed upon them by the old curate and Mr. Dion was broken, that the taxes they had to pay the store were at an end, with the monopoly which had cost them so much money. Many came to Mr. St. Pierre to hear from his own lips that their new curate had at once freed them from what they considered the long and ignominious bondage against which they had so often but so vainly protested. For the rest of this week, this was the only subject of conversation. They congratulated themselves that they had at last a priest with such an independent and honest mind that he would not do them any injustice, even to please a relative in whose house he had spent the years of his childhood. This simple act of fair play towards the people won over their affection. Only one little dark spot remained in their minds against me. They had been told that the only subject on which I would preach was rum, whiskey, and drunkenness, and it seemed to them exceedingly tedious to hear nothing else from the curate, particularly when they were more than ever determined to continue drinking their social glasses of brandy, rum, and wine. There was an immense crowd at the church the next Sunday. My text was, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you," John 15:9, showing them how Jesus had proved that he was their friend. But their sentiments of piety and pleasure at what they had heard were nothing compared to their surprise when they saw that I preached nearly an hour without saying a word on whiskey, rum, or beer. People are often compared to the waters of the sea in the Holy Scriptures. When you see the roaring waves dashing on that rock today, as if they wanted to demolish it, do not fear that this fury will last long. The very next day, if the wind has changed, the same waters will leave that rock alone to spend their fury on the opposite rock. So it was in Kamarooska. They were full of indignation and wrath when I had set my feet in their midst. But a few days later, those very men would have given the last drop of their blood to protect me. The dear Savior had evidently seen the threatening storm which was about to destroy his poor unprofitable servant. He had heard the roaring waves which were dashing against me. So he came down and bid the storm, "Peace, be still," and the waves be calm. The end. of chapter 39, 50 Years in the Church of Rome.